we are going to invite Dinesh, CTO at Civo, in for the talk on achieving resilience and efficiency with Kubernetes in a multi-cloud environment. So thank you, Dinesh.
Hi,
Welcome.
Dinesh.
Hi, good to see
All
everyone.
right, got your
Some
slides
great talks
up, looking
already.
good.
Can you hear
I
me?
think,
Is that
can
coming
you say
through?
hello, Dinesh? I'm not sure.
Hello?
I want to make sure I can hear you.
Hello? Yes.
Oh, I can hear you. Yes,
Okay.
you're quiet.
A
You
little
might have to
quiet.
shout.
A little bit quiet. Hang on, I'll move the microphone, and that probably will help.
Yeah, it's quite quiet.
It's quite quiet. It's got adjust volume automatically. Let's move some buttons on here. Is that any better?
Not for us.
Yeah. Let us know if you can hear Dinesh perfectly. Let us know.
It's too quiet.
Yeah,
Too
quiet.
quiet.
Okay.
Too quiet.
Yeah.
Too quiet.
Are you maybe using a microphone from a laptop that's shut and docked and not?
Assumingly
Usually
not.
what
There is
happens.
a big.
Yeah,
There is a big.
that's what happens to me.
There is a big microphone that is
That's a
usually.
little
It's a
better.
little better. I've got to lean forward right next to the microphone. That might be
Perfect.
better.
We
There we
look
go.
great. So
Thank you.
Okay. Oh no, some people still can't hear you.
Still can't hear me.
Too quiet. Thank you everybody for feedback, because
it's hard to know whether it's just us or
if you could see our setup here. You could scotch tape and band-aids. Yeah. So technical difficulties. It always happens, but this is why we have a little buffer. So
we love a live event for this.
Yeah, Carol says good enough. Well, I don't know. See if you can turn up in the program volume. AirPods may have given up.
I love when we have a community event like this and everyone like joins together to be like, let's solve this. So,
Yeah.
Oh my God.
How's that? Is that better? There we go.
Yeah. Great.
Way better.
All right.
What I've done, get rid of the expensive microphone, swap over to AirPods, which are also expensive microphones. So I don't know, I don't know which way that works.
You sound great now, though. So with that, we are going to duck up and
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, CTO at Civo, really, really technically capable, unless it comes to microphones and screen sharing and all of that. But I've been in the hosting industry for a long time, mostly playing with servers and deploying things out to clouds. And very recently at Civo, we are building a public cloud. And our public cloud is actually underpinned by Kubernetes. So we are doing multi-cloud by definition. We are multi-hardware location by default, and everything that you use is underpinned by Kubernetes. So what is the cloud? At the end of the day, it is going to be servers that are living in a data center somewhere. So regardless of who you're choosing, who you're using, this is an AI generated image. This is not from our data center, but there is going to be someone there that is going to be having servers that are racked up. They're going to be cabled together, and there's going to be power attached, which means that things are going to go wrong. And this happens to everyone. I think I've gone back through this year and just picked out a few of the more high profile issues that have happened with various cloud providers. So Google have had a water/fire in one of their European data centers in Paris, and that's taken them out for 3 weeks. One of the interesting things around there is that when people are doing data backups, is that data backups are generally in the same AZ. So when the entire region went down or the zone went down, you couldn't access your backups and get data out. US East 1, I think infamously is one of the least reliable AWS regions out there, has had issues with Lambda only a few months ago. There's actually a huge amount of the internet that is still reliant on US East 1. Thinking back, there were issues when DNS went offline, when US East went offline, and I think 80% of the internet, while still available, couldn't be found. I can't sit here and say that we're not also part of this same thing. We've had an issue in New York very recently that took it out for a good few days. I am at KubeCon. I will share all of the gory details if you come by the booth and say hi. But yeah, not the nicest of things to happen on the cloud provider side either. I think it's also something to highlight that it's not only underlying servers and cloud technology that can go offline and cause you issues. Exchange going offline, 365 and Teams having issues, as listed here, actually has a material impact on the business. And we've found that generally it's the DevOps teams that are responsible for managing these other services that are out there. So whether that's email or SharePoint or conversations and communication, it still will end up on the team that is responsible for kind of looking after it. And it is not just Teams. Slack has also been down, which I know a lot of people in our kind of area use. So it can happen to everyone. And even when you do put in best practices and you are multi-cloud, you can still have issues and still have outages. So that's not saying that multi-cloud shouldn't be done, but just be wary that there are processes above and beyond just being in multiple cloud regions, in multiple AZs, that you do need to consider. And going multi-cloud is a cultural thing as well as a technology. So I think we've all seen this image before. This could be defined as the cloud. Everything is fine. Ignore it. Fires and everything burning around behind you. But I really want to change and challenge today what this image should mean and try and leave you at the end of this and set the demos up for the rest of the day of why you should really look at this image differently. Looking over the outages that have happened and that have been reported, kind of looking, there are some definite reasons why services go offline. So there are vendor outages, be that your cloud vendor or if you're a cloud itself, you even have vendors. So they're out of your control. I'd actually say all of these things are out of your control. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't prepare for them, but a targeted attack or a generic DDoS attack against your provider is going to take your services offline. Black Friday comes around. Okay, maybe you can plan for Black Friday, but there was the infamous, you suddenly hit the front page of Reddit and there is a massive spike in the traffic that you get sent and that your site has to handle, and that could take you offline. So definitely planning around some of these issues that take you offline, but not a huge amount you can do to plan and predict for it. However, there are things that happen that are under your control. So these are software bugs. If you've got a release cycle that is pushing stuff out and testing it, it shouldn't happen. However, generally, as soon as you put something in front of users, they will do something weird and wonderful, and they will find the edge cases and find bugs. And there's always the human error side of things as well. So be this from a software person all the way down to a DevOps engineer of, I just made a mistake. I thought I was connected to staging and I did a database delete and I wasn't. Suddenly all of the production database is offline. It's just disappeared and you've got to go to last night backups. I would, if this was a room, I would say put your hands up, but I'm sure that everyone has had a horror story of that happening, not necessarily deleting a database, but connecting to the wrong region, running a command that you weren't expecting and having that impact happen. So probably everyone has seen these before. And this is where multi-cloud comes in. So multi-cloud could be considered at its biggest thing of having your applications and services deployed across multiple cloud companies in multiple regions. However, that's quite a end goal to get to. And really, you should be looking at your infrastructure today and start looking, how can we slowly add resilience and get to this utopia of having things across multiple clouds and multiple vendors? So start looking at multiple AZs or moving to something like Kubernetes first to have your application self-healing to a certain extent, then multiple AZs, and then going out to multiple regions in an individual cloud provider before taking that next step and going out to multi-cloud and multiple cloud vendors. I kind of mentioned this at the start that multi-cloud is really a cultural shift as well as a technology shift. By going down the route of implementing multi-cloud, you're changing the way that you, your team, and the business generally accepts risk and how they look at risk of deploying an application. And by that, there's also a huge amount of time and investment that needs to go into putting technology into place, putting processes into place, and getting you into a position where you can run multi-cloud. It's unfortunately not a button that you can tick or a button you can push or a checkbox you can tick that suddenly gets you where you need to be. It's a really deep cultural and business change that needs to happen. Going down the external issues, so obviously it reduces it. You are going to be very unlucky if something affects Microsoft Azure and AWS and Civo all at the same time. And realistically, when that day happens, we've probably got bigger issues to look at than my cloud is down and my application is offline. Going down on the reduces the impact of human error. If you go down setting up multi-cloud correctly, and you are able to put CI/CD in place and do staged rollouts, human error will still happen, but you're reducing the impact of it. So hopefully, rather than this issue affecting all of your cloud deployments, it's limited to one cluster or one geographical region, and you should have processes in place so you can easily move traffic away from that, or ideally, it's all automatically moved away from that one region and gives you and your teams time to fix it. However, it's not easy outside of the cultural things. Vendor lock-in is a huge issue when looking at multi-cloud. So when you are embedded with a cloud provider at the moment, you're normally using proprietary technology that they have got. So whether that is, the particular flavor of database deployments, and it's going to be either different very slightly or very significantly of putting that into a different cloud provider. And then you go down the stack, and the more opinionated a technology is, the likely the harder it is that you are locked into that particular vendor. That's also needing to add that moving your data out of an existing vendor can be quite expensive with egress fees as well. So it would be great if you start off a brand new project and you've got everything that's multi-cloud. However, moving to a multi-cloud world is going to take, again, engineering and around some of these vendor issues that are there. Data locality is one thing as well that makes cloud hard. We've got some really good Cockroach Labs demos later today as part of the environment about having customer data in a particular location geographically. And that's a really, really good place to be when you start going multi-cloud, because if your users are in the EU, then they can access their data that stays in the EU. If they're in the US, and you can make sure that their data stays in the US, not only from a speed point of view, but a regulatory point of view, that's really, really, really good place to be. The other thing that makes multi-cloud hard is your existing staff's technical experience. Generally, there are staff that you have hired because you are using a cloud vendor at the moment. And the staff that you have are really, really, really skilled at using those technologies and interfacing with that one cloud provider. If you take them and say, right, you are with AWS at the moment and you need to move over to GKE, there's going to be a training and a skills gap of just how that individual platform works. So you're going to have to invest time into your staff or hire additional staff that are particularly experienced in that particular cloud to get up and running. Now, I would caution against getting particular staff in to manage individual clouds. There's the saying that deployment practices follow the organizational structure. And if you are setting up two teams to manage two separate environments, generally you will find that those teams won't communicate as well as they could do, and you'll create another barrier between that, and you'll start seeing problems about how you deploy your application to each environment. So my recommendation there would be to have a single team that is multi-skilled and has experts in one cloud provider A and cloud provider B, yet they're working together and working cohesively to get your product out and get your uptime sorted. I think Kubernetes is a really, really great tool that we're all using at the moment that solves a lot of the challenges that have been presented earlier. So Kubernetes provides this vendor agnostic, same API across different cloud providers to interact with your applications and interact with your infrastructure. Having that consistent API and abstracting things away, take storage. You'll have just a storage class that lives in cloud provider A, and while it may be a different name in cloud provider B, all of the actual implementation of how you provision volumes, how they get attached to pods, is handled by this CSI component that you as an application deployer don't need to worry about. You can even do things like defining a custom storage class in cluster A and cluster B, which have the right labels that they will provision the right sort of backend infrastructure. So AWS will provision AWS volumes and Civo will produce Civo volumes. Yet from your application's point of view, it's still a single storage class with the same name that just happens to be deployed to two different clusters and is provisioned by two different backends. And that, I think, is the wonderful thing about the Kubernetes API and custom resources and how the whole approach to managing applications with K8s is great. Going from 1 to 2 is really, really hard, and going from 2 to many is generally easier. And I think with Kubernetes, we're all been trained from day one of using it to do that many side of a deployment. And having resilience by design and high availability from day one of your deployments means taking an application in a single region and moving it to a multi-cloud region is really a lot easier. There's some plumbing that you need to do around the outside, but your application tier is almost ready to go with multi-cloud from day one. And that's a massive hurdle to kind of get over that Kubernetes gives you almost by default. And then there is a huge number of projects out there. We're going to talk about some great ones with the partners that we've got on today about how you can use all of these tools to orchestrate multi-cloud, how to scale, how to add certs, how to do ingress, how to do MTLS across multi-clusters. So there's just a huge number of projects that all subscribe to the Kubernetes way of working that makes multi-cloud a lot easier to run. We have some other challenges around this. So automation becomes really, really key. So when you're deploying now from one environment to about 10 deployments, you need to make sure that you're automated. You can no longer be doing things by ClickOps of going into cluster A and doing an upgrade or going into cluster A and do a deployment. So automation is absolutely key, and you should be in a position where you are able to deploy multiple times a day without anyone having to touch anything. Okay, you've got to probably approve a PR and have that go onto a main branch, but absolutely key that you have to deploy out to. Some of the tools out there to help. We've got a question that's come up, so I'll take that now about how many cloud providers that we're going to be deploying to. So it is one cloud provider. It's going to be Civo for the demos, but it's going to be across 2 or 3 of our regions. So it's going to be geographically diverse for the demo. Back to the automation. So I would say the way that we're going to work today and the way that we work inside Civo is that we have 2 tools to do 2 different layers of automation. So our infrastructure is stood up by Terraform, however, Crossplane and Pulumi are a great alternative out there. And then we do application deployment with GitOps. So at Civo, we use Argo CD, but Flux is the other, I think, generally used tool out there. I personally have no preference around either. I think they're all great tools. All 5 of the tools are great. I just started with the tools that I'm going to be using in the demo, but that's not to say that the others aren't going to do the same thing. So for the demo, I'm going to be spinning up 2 clusters. Again, infrastructure provided by Terraform, and then applications by Argo. We're going to get 1 Civo cluster up in London and 1 Civo cluster up in New York. And the Git repo for this infrastructure is available here. I can probably put it in the chat at the end of the session as well. But as a very, very high level, we've got the Git repo at the top where we have a Terraform folder and an Argo CD folder. The Terraform folder has a shared infrastructure module that both London and New York are using. And then we're using the Argo CD application set and the dynamic generation of applications to here get Argo CD itself installed and then Cert Manager installed. And we'll show down in the bottom the 2 clusters there, London and New York, with Argo CD and Cert Manager deployed. And the pattern that we're using today can be extended to add whatever other applications that you are going to be managing inside these clusters, and also apply to n number of clusters as you go out. So if we swap over to the terminal. So what we've got up here is the 2 modules that we're going to be using, or the 2 references that we're going to be using. Just going to swap over, check that hopefully size of that is fine. I'm going to assume it's good. So you can see here that there's a very small difference between the 2 modules that we're going to be deploying. We've got the name prefix from London to New York, and then the Argo CD route that we're going to be going. So we've got London over here, and we've got New York over here. Other than that, these modules are exactly the same. The infrastructure module itself mainly consists of 4 resources. So we've got the cluster itself, the network, and the firewall. So if I scroll through those, little shout out to Civo. We're really keen on making like developer experience really nice. So this is everything that we're going to be using in the demo to spin up, and it is about 40 lines of code. We've got the network up at the top. What we're doing is we're pulling in that prefix there, so it makes it easy when you are looking around an interface or you are using some of the CLIs out there, that you know that you're in London or that you're in New York. And that's pulled all the way through from this name prefix that we've passed into the module. We've got a firewall where we can start restricting what has access or what networks have access to the clusters. And then we've got a basic cluster down here with some default sizes and counts that get pushed out. The last thing on this is a output of the kubeconfig, and that is not required for the demo. Sorry, it's not required for the infrastructure, but it makes life really, really easy in the demo to start querying what's running in the cluster. So I have pre-prepared the clusters just for the purpose of the demo, and given the audio issues that we had at the start, I'm very grateful that I did. 2 minutes is going to really, really save me. So what we've got left to apply is the cluster config, writing that down to disk, and then the install of Argo. We'll get that running. So one of the interesting things about Argo is that when we install it this way, because I've got the application sets as part of my Argo resources, the first time that I install Argo, it will fail. And that's because the application set custom resource definition doesn't exist. So I just got this set up that it runs it twice after a little 10-second gap, and the second one runs through and installs it. We'll quickly run through, and there are the 3 resources now that we are going to apply out to New York. So we'll get those running. And again, this is going to do the same thing of writing a kubeconfig down to file, do the first install of Argo, and then the second run to actually get that application set installed. 10 seconds always seems longer when you're demoing it rather than you sitting around. I'm reminded of the XKCD comment of my code is compiling. I think my Terraform apply is running is the DevOps and equivalent of that.
So Dinesh, for the 10 seconds, there was a question here. How security is offered while using this resources offered from Civo? Where's the
infrastructure? Where is the infrastructure built?
So we have our own data centers and it's our own servers. So it's completely owned by Civo. All of the networking is ours. We get connectivity in. So we're not backed off of any other cloud provider. We are the cloud provider and we have got our own kit that we're pushing out.
Just see, now the 10 seconds is gone. Now I can duck out again.
Right, so we've got a kubectl get nodes here against London. So 56 minutes ago, this is when the entire cluster stood up. New York, again, 54 minutes ago. However, just showing that the demo is running here, Argo CD has only been installed into London 2 minutes ago as that is running. As I said, we were using the Argo CD application set method to get installed. So this is the application set that we've got in London. And what we're doing inside this application set in London and in New York is we're defining two different paths where these applications can get installed. So now if you need to customize London with its own ingress or its own domain names, you put those in the London folder. And then if you need to customize New York, you do that. And again, this is a pattern that you can now extend n times to get everything that you need running and customized. The way that we're doing that with customize as well is we've got a single application set, and then we are using patches in customize to change whether or not we're going to be installing London or New York. And my Terraform, as we set at the start with that module, defines whether or not we're going to be installing the London customize or the New York customize into the clusters as they turn up. So doing a quick check of the applications that we should get installed into London, we've got Argo CD itself, because Argo CD can manage Argo CD and it gets a bit inception. And just to get us off for the demo, we've got Cert Manager that we're going to get installed. I've set up Argo CD to autosync, so the application should be installed. New York here showing Argo CD and Cert Manager should be there. We get all the pods in London and we can see that thankfully it's worked as expected, and we've got Argo CD running, we've got Cert Manager running, and I didn't have to do anything other than apply the initial Terraform. We have got obviously an error inside the kube system stuff for the Civo things, but we've got Cert Manager up here in New York and we've got Argo CD running at the moment. So if we swap over back to the slides, what we've just done there is, while we had the clusters pre-provisioned, we got via Terraform and via Argo CD, the rest of the config applied to the clusters, and then our first two applications deployed, which is Argo CD, which will allow us to do future applications, and Cert Manager, and we've got those applied out into the two regions. The repo up there is something that you can check out and follow along, and it is, I think, just a make demo, and that should get you up and running. You might need to get some API keys, but I'll update the README and make sure that is clear there. So some of the key things to look out for when you start your multi-cloud journey, try and use managed Kubernetes where you can. Running Kubernetes is very different to running applications on Kubernetes. So definitely use them rather than trying to roll your own. You're going to have enough fun and challenges to work for rather than running Kubernetes itself. And then here's just a list of other things that kind of you need to keep in mind when you are starting to run through your multi-cloud enablement. And then a list of questions here as well about what you can ask about whether or not you are multi-cloud ready. So are you locked in with any cloud specific products? Is your data ready to be moved between different clusters and different regions? Are you actually legally allowed to do that? And there are things like GDPR that mean that certain data needs to stay in certain geographical regions, but there are also potentially compliance restrictions around whether or not you can actually operate in certain regions. CI/CD. So today, obviously, the demo has taken us into a completely automated thing. Getting that into a GitHub or a GitLab pipeline becomes really, really easy to take onwards. And then how robust are your DR processes? How ready is your team to have an application go down and know, oh, it is in London. This is how I connect to London. This is how I start debugging London, and not get into the situation we spoke about earlier of, I thought I was connected to London and I turned it all off and on again, but I was actually connected to New York. So while I was having problems in London, I've now compounded it with human error of having New York offline at the same time. So coming back to this image, what I kind of really want to say is that this really can be a position where you can get to where everything is fine. The world around you can be on fire. A cloud region can be offline. Your services could be offline in a single region. And yet everything should be fine. Kubernetes will let you have your application running. You can go down to the pub, have a pint, and when the cloud vendor comes back online, everything is truly fine. Couple of callouts for Civo. So everything that I demoed today and that we'll be demoing today can be run on Civo. The $250 credit that you get from startup is more than enough to get all of the demos up and running. We are running our own event in Austin. It'll be the third time that we're running it, and it will be great to see everyone there. I think that was it. Over to questions. Oh, shout out to the two other kind of really interesting talks that I'm looking forward to. So the multi-cluster in an hour, and then the Mercedes-Benz journey of using it in the real world, I think should be really, really interesting talks. So stick around and catch those two, as well as all of the other talks that are happening.
I was Dinesh, and I'm like, this is awesome. I love you plugging the other talks. That's so great. Thank you so much.